Okay, everybody, welcome. This is the very first video for the summer creative writing workshop. So we're going to talk about like one thing at a time. So these videos will be very short. So the very first thing we're going to talk about, and we're going to spend a few weeks on this. So don't freak out if you don't quite get it the first time. It is show, don't tell. So when we say show, don't tell, oftentimes in creative writing, this is referred to as the golden rule of writing. Like we have the golden rule of life, obviously, and writing, this is the rule that everyone should follow. Now, this is specific to creative writing because show, don't tell means to use details and actions to explain things to your reader rather than doing an info dump, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So you're going to kind of show them rather than tell. So this is very different than like if you're writing a response to a question about the American Revolution. In that case, you're just going to tell. So anything educational wise, any classes, you're going to tell in your responses. But when it comes to creative writing, you don't want to tell, you want to show. So an example of telling would be to say, Michael was terribly afraid of the dark. You just straight up say afraid and what he's afraid of. There's no show there. It's very straightforward. And this doesn't work for creative writing like it does in, research reports, scientific or historical explanations. It doesn't work in creative writing because creative writing is supposed to be creative. So instead of saying Michael was terribly afraid of the dark, you could say, as his mother switched off the light and left the room, Michael tensed. He huddled under the covers, gripped the sheets, and held his breath as the wind brushed past the curtain. Notice we never use the word afraid in here. That emotion is not outright stated. The reader infers it because Michael tensed and then he huddled under the covers. He gripped the sheets and held his breath. All those things show his fear. And they're much more interesting than simply telling your reader they're afraid, because the reader now can picture exactly what Michael is doing instead of being, okay, how is Michael showing his fear here? Now, the other thing is it doesn't say Michael, tensed because of the dark. No, at the very beginning, his mother switched off the light and left the room. That, again, is showing us what he's afraid of. What is he afraid of? Well, the dark. He didn't start his reaction until his mother turned off the light. So one thing to keep in mind is not to info dump. Now, info dump is the problem in creative writing because, again, we're so used to writing responses in class to things, and those are info dumps. You have to respond to a question about history or science, or even in language arts, you have to respond to something and the response needs all that info. Creative writing is the exception here, and we don't do that as often as we do the other kinds of writing. So an info dump is basically the person, say it's the author at the beginning, gives out all the information straightforward. They state it about the story and the characters. What's going on, what's happening, and what are the characters like? And info dumps are bad for creative writing. They're not interesting. They're boring, and they don't allow the reader to use their imagination. Anton Chekhov, who is a famous Russian playwright, he's the one who said it best. And you're going to see this a lot if you look up info dump or show, don't tell. He has a very famous quote where he said, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass." You can see the difference there. The moon is shining is very boring and bland. Saying the light glinted off of broken glass has a lot more intriguing elements that allow you to picture what's happening. So you're going to use your sensory details and creative descriptions rather than do that info dump. So an info dump could be, this is a big downfall in fantasy writing. A lot of times they'll be like, Anthony was a wizard. He was a wizard who was tired of using his magic all the time. He needed a better source for his magic. He lived in the land called blah, blah, blah. that's info dumping. You have to reveal it in other ways using your sensory details. So any of the senses, using creative descriptions. So we're going to talk about some of those ways. So when you're writing a longer story or even a short story, if you're going to do Power of the Pen writing, outline first. Your outline doesn't have to be long. Your outline is where you're going to tell. In your outline, you can tell, okay, the magician lost her magic. She couldn't figure out what was going on. So just write that in your outline. When you have it outlined, it's easier when you go to write to make it more creative because you know exactly what you're going for. Now you're going to translate that into more imaginative writing. So ways you can do that are through dialogue, facial expression, body language, character actions, sensory details. And one big way is to avoid using there is and there are. And there are more phrases like that to avoid, but you could be like, there are 3 puppies. Instead say, the 3 puppies yipped and bit each other, because that kind of implies that they're playful. So dialogue allows us to reveal things without info dumping, using the facial expression of your characters. For example, instead of saying Sally was annoyed at what Billy said, you can say, as Billy spoke, Sally sighed and rolled her eyes. I'm not outright stating Sally was annoyed. I'm giving an illustration of how she was annoyed. Body language. What is the character doing? As I said with the Sally and Billy example. Actions of the characters. If your character is wielding a weapon, that's going to give you an idea that they're in some kind of struggle. If your character is simply writing, or if they're playing basketball, all of these give clues to what's going on in the story without outright stating it. And then, of course, as I said, your sensory details. Is there a smell? Is there an image? So this week, I've posted a prompt, and it says week 1, show, don't tell. So basically what you're focused on here is, and I don't want to give you the prompt now, because if you're going to be practicing for Power of the Pen, you don't get the prompt until your timer starts. Some of you are just going to want to creative write for however long you want, and that's fine. But for those of you who want to practice under Power of the Pen competition rules, you don't see the prompt until the timer kind of starts. So I leave that up to you. You can time yourself for 40 minutes. Now that 40 minutes covers reading the prompt, deciding your story, deciding your title, and outlining, and then writing a complete story. And for Power of the Pen, in that 40 minutes, you have to write a beginning, middle, and end with no cliffhanger. Some of you will probably want to write longer or shorter as you're building up, and that's fine too. I leave it up to you if you're going to follow those Power of the Pen standards or your own creative writing limitations. So again, I'm not telling you the prompt. It is in week 1, show, don't tell, and you have a week to respond to that, and then I'll look at the responses that I get. So again, if you want to practice for Power of the Pen, follow those round rules. 40 minutes for everything. So you can start your own timer. You can do all sorts of things like that so that you are following the rules for Power of the Pen. And if you have questions about that, feel free to email me. I may not respond right away, or you can write in the Google Classroom. You can write in response. You should be able to comment on the week 1 show, don't tell, but I leave that up to you once again. Okay, so while you're writing this prompt, I want you to think, okay, how can I show things rather than tell? So again, you may want to outline first. Now we're going to talk about the easiest standards for outlining in a few weeks, but just tell yourself, okay, looking at this prompt, what's my problem? What's my beginning, middle, and end? Who is my character, or who are my characters? And then once you've outlined that, now you can start getting into the creative part of creative writing as you write your story as to how to show and not tell the story and the characterization. All right, good luck.